do is gloat. I was right. I said when I saw that tweet from Trump, or truth from Trump, that he had a deal. He was going to play it out through the news cycle, doing some big bombastic threat, and that he was going to be and then at the end, he just announced there was some sort of ceasefire or deal in place. And what happened at 6:30 last night? I'm in my restream. I was in my two-way community chat, and Trump suddenly comes out. Oh yeah, by the way, we have a deal. Of course, he had a deal. You don't make threats like that unless you have a deal in mind. God, and people are still, no, he's a petulant little child. I read this New York Times piece. I'm like, that one has an agenda. And that agenda is always the traditional, it's all Israel's fault. Not that America has any strategic reason to do any of this stuff. Sorry, got something in my mouth. And it's just ridiculous that people continue to think that this is what's going on. Guys, I give people a heads up. I do my shows. I'm looking to do an interview with another friend of mine shortly, later this week, which will be much more like the Richard Swank interview, which is not very, the usual stuff. It was more like this as an interview with a guy I met, want to get to know him, and let you meet some of the people that are informing me of how the kind of my look at my friends and sources of information. He's definitely not in the conspiracy mind. He's much more regular, ex-Marine, current lawyer, and just that kind of guy. So that's where we're going. But I just wanted to gloat. I said he had a deal already in play when he made the truth post, and it was hilarious just watching all these people crash out over the New York Times episode, or New York Times piece, which I hadn't read, but it kind of matches what we're doing. But it's like Trump keeps his own counsel, and sometimes I don't know if it's all the regular stuff about like, is this planned? Is this organized? Is it fly by our seat of our pants? Is it carefully crafted narrative stuff, counter think tank versus the think tanks? Or is this just, how the history plays out? So I can't really always tell it at the time. So I kind of give it my different ideas. And now I've got Grok to script out the show for first half of the show. And then I'm going to react to another political rich story with Blaine Holt, which they recorded before the day of the ceasefire. And Blaine also talks a lot about this NATO summit meeting. But right now we're going to talk about Iran from a foreign policy realist thing. Welcome to the Spy Guy channel, where we don't chase hand in the lines, we dissect the operations, the backroom leverage, the intelligence blind spots, the raw power calculations that decide who wins and who bleeds. I'm your host, David March, and today is April 8th, 2026. The board is still smoking. Operation Epic Fury is in a 2-week pause, but the Strait of Hormuz remains a live wire. Trump's apocalyptic truth posts, you already heard my opinion on that, but Grok doesn't always know what I'm commenting on the side. Let the fuse. Iran pushed back with a 10-point maximalist counter, and the insurance markets just turned the economic screws even tighter. Meanwhile, the world watches the Middle East. NASA's Artemis 2 crew is flying further from Earth than any humans in history, and that's no coincidence. 3 deep dive segments today. We'll run the realist numbers on the Iran ceasefire gamble, expose the hidden economic war choking the strait, and zoom out to the space domain where great power competition never sleeps. No spin, just the field report. Let's get into the ops room. Article 1, Topic 1, Iran, the fragile 2-week ceasefire. Trump's ultimatum meets Tehran's maximalist counter. Let's start with the kinetic pause that almost wasn't. Late last night, just hours before Trump's 8 p.m. ETA deadline, the White House announced a 2-week suspension of strikes. The trigger Pakistan-mediated back channels and Iran's sudden 10-point proposal. And that's also something, it also gives both sides a chance to do an operational pause give all those crews who've been flying like 20-hour work days time to get some sleep, relax in R&R, and just maintain all those vehicles that have been not operating non-stop for 6 weeks. You need an operational pause, and that's what has coming here. Recall Trump's Truth Social post from yesterday morning. A whole civilization will die tonight, never to be brought back again. But maybe something revolutionary, wonderful can happen. Who knows? Classic maximum pressure rhetoric. Threaten total obliteration of power plants, bridges, and infrastructure that dangle an off-ramp under new, smarter minds. And like I said, you don't make that post until you have something already. Iran's response was textbook asymmetric defiance. Foreign Ministry and IRGC spokesman called the post nervous, unbalanced, and stupid. They rejected any short-term ceasefire outright, insisting on a permanent end to hostilities, full sanctions relief, reconstruction compensation, and a protocol that lets them keep some control over Hormuz tolls. Their counter proposal was labeled maximalist by U.S. officials, but it brought them breathing room. This also is a 2-week operational pause for Iran to assess the battle damage. My realist lens, this isn't weakness on Iran's part in endurance warfare. They know the U.S. doesn't want another occupation or nation-building sequel, and they can't do it. Every extra day of disruption spikes global oil prices, erodes domestic support here, and hands narrative wins to Beijing and Moscow. Trump got the military degradation he wanted. 80 to 90% of key Iranian systems hit, and converting that into a durable off-ramp without overextension is the real test. Yeah, we already saw the markets. Overnight markets completely collapse. It's going back to $80 a barrel. And probably by the end of this, we'll be at $30 to $40 a barrel oil. And that'll be great for everyone. That'll probably be by the end of the summer at this rate, unless something blows up in our face. What they're not telling you, this 2-week window is already being used for back-channel horse trading. Iran is coordinating technical and security considerations for safe passage, but they're framing the pause as a U.S. back down. Watch for Saudi and Emirati quiet pressure. They want the Strait open yesterday, but don't want to own the aftermath. From a pure interest perspective, this pause serves U.S. goals in it if it locks in verifiable denuclearization and reopen shipping lanes without boots on the ground. Anything less, and we're just kicking the can while adversaries consolidate elsewhere. Note, if the 10-point deal collapsed by April 22nd, expect the threats to resume realism, says declare victory on capabilities degraded and walk away. Don't use the vacuum. Don't own the vacuum. Item number 2. Good night, Harala Panesh. Thank you. It's actually still afternoon here, but thanks for the comment. Iran, the Lloyd's of London insurance shock. Economic warfare choking the Strait of Hormuz. Now the non-kinetic front has done so as much damage as the missiles. It's early March, right after the first wave of strikes. Major P&I clubs and London market insurance, including Lloyd syndicates, issued notices of cancellation for war risk coverage in Iranian waters and the Persian Gulf. Now, Lloyd's of London did not cancel every single contract outright. That's a common misread, and that is something I misread. That is something I have to apologize for. But this kind of stuff is new to me, so didn't want to say it. What they did was far more surgical and devastating. War risk premiums exploded from under 1% to 3.5% to 7.5% or higher per voyage. Many policies were reviewed case by case, replaced at right price terms are simply not renewed for the high risk zone. The result, tanker transits through the Strait collapsed 80% at peak. Ship owners voted with their wallets too dangerous and too expensive. Not the Greeks. The Greeks got all their boats out of there right away. They knew that the threat of closing the Strait was not an actual close of the Strait. So all the Greeks just sailed immediately. Because gotta love Greeks in their shipping empires. Spy guy angle. This is economic warfare at its finest. Insurance market as a silent force multiplier. No U.S. Navy ship has to fire a shot. The private sector just prices the risk of existence out of existence. Iran knows this. They weaponized the choke point before, and that's what I keep hearing. Oh, they closed the strait. Oh no, they do this all the time. Iran exists to close the strait, to be that kind of blackmail. That's why we need to start building nuclear power plants, and so that oil goes down from $5 a barrel, and we don't have to worry about the Middle East ever again. Europe and Asia, far more dependent on Gulf oil, are now screaming for resolution. This creates natural pressure on Tehran without additional U.S. blood or treasure. Watch for U.S. government-backed reinsurance facilities quietly being discussed. Oh, they're not being quietly being discussed. They're openly to be discussed on this show. A smart way to backstop coverage without owning the risk. What they're not telling you, some vessels are still moving under special high premium policies or flags of convenience, but the de facto slowdown is exactly what maximum pressure strategy wants. Combine this with the 2-week pause and you have a pincher. Military degradation plus economic strangulation. The question is whether Iran blinks before global markets force Washington's hand. Oh, we've already seen the markets and they're going down. Now, unfortunately, I can't show you that particular show because it's a private show that I watch via someone's Patreon. While the world watches the Middle East and it burns, NASA's Artemis 2 mission is quietly rewriting the record books. Launched April 1st, the 4-person crew who you've done, watch the April 1st show to see it. You go into a bit more of a breakdown on Reed Wiseman, Victor Glover, Christina Koch, and my fellow countryman, Jeremy Hansen. They completed the first crewed lunar flyby in over 50 years. On April 6th, they went further than Earth than any human since Apollo 13. And as this morning, they're on the return leg, splashdown set for April 10th. Daily briefings from Johnson Space Center shows systems nominal, stunning Earth moon imagery coming down, and the crew holding a live news conference today. Trump personally called them mid-mission, invited them to the White House. Is already talking autographs. My realist take, this isn't just science, it's strategic signaling. While adversaries focus on Hormuz and proxies, the U.S. is demonstrating enduring presence in cislunar space. Artemis 2 is the dress rehearsal for Artemis 3, a planned crewed landing, and the long-term goal of the lunar gateway and sustained operations. In great power competition, space is the ultimate high ground. China is pushing 140 launches this year, expanding its Qigong station and accelerating its own lunar landing timeline toward 2030. Every successful U.S. crewed milestone reminds Beijing that America still sets the pace. What they're not telling you, this timing is no accident. When the world is distracted by oil prices as an ultimatum, U.S. is investing in dual-use capabilities, reliable heavy lift, deep space comms, radiation-hardened systems that feed directly into Space Force priorities. The proposed $71 billion Space Force budget increase under Trump's defense plan isn't charity. It's about denying China and Russia sanctuary in orbit. Yes, the future is going to be in space. It's not going to be in stupid wars in stupid places on the ground fighting for barbarians. Realism says treat space like any other domestic secure domain. Secure the laws, lanes, maintain superiority, and use commercial muscle, SpaceX and Blue Origin to outpace state competitors. Artemis 2 proves the hardware works. The real test is whether we sustain the momentum without letting terrestrial crises pull funding or focus away. That's the full intel briefing for today on the Spy Guy channel. The high-stakes Iran ceasefire poker game. The invisible insurance war strangling the strait, and the quiet but critical Artemis 2 flight remind us the real great power contest never stops. These stories expose the same truth leverages everything, whether it's missiles, markets, or moonshots. The side that calculates interest coldly usually comes out ahead. Drop your intel in the comments. And the 2-week pause is the 2-week pause buying real progress or just breathing room for Tehran? How long before the insurance shock forces a deal? And does Artemis 2 prove America is still the space leader, or are we one budget cut away from falling behind? Subscribe, hit notifications, and stay sharp. The shadows never sleep. Okay, that's the AI briefing. Now we go on to the second phase of my show, and it's going to be covering the Blatant Holt interview. So let me share that. Ooh, nope, wrong button. Share screen. And we'll go over here. Put a like on. We support the bees. I support the guys.
That in this Easter Sunday message draws close. That's what we're going to talk about in this video. Isn't it, retired General Blaine Holt?
Yes, and let's remember that retired means no security clearance, not read into anything, can't break the law that way.
No, retired Brigadier General Blaine Holt, second in command to the NATO delegation at one point for the US Air Force, and involved in other military projects and stuff. So, Blaine, what's happening? What's happening? And what's going to happen?
The better question is what's not happening. That's the better question. we have our colonel back, the aviator, the pilot, and the weapon system officer in the back of the F-15. So
the first one or the second one?
The second one. We got him back over the weekend, and that was a huge rescue. We're all rejoicing and very, very happy about that. But now the president is really honing in on cleaning up the last of this nonsense called the Iranian regime. And before anybody cries crocodile tears, which I understand is very common in Europe, to cry crocodile tears for the mullah and the ayatollah. That Europe, no less, installed in 1979. Let's all remember, as we all start to look at this regime fading out, we're not going to be under a nuclear war threat anymore from a country called Iran. We're not going to have state-sponsored terror throughout Europe and the United States and other places. We're not going to be seeing the three proxies with American taxpayer cash from some Marxist future president who has a different view on life. Those things are all off the table, which and that will start, I believe, little birdies talking to me tonight, in a matter of hours from us talking about this. And
oh yeah, definitely. We've already seen the results. Now, Israel's saying Iran has been fussing around with Israel because Israel's bombing Hezbollah. And they're saying that's the same thing as doing that, but I think that'll get smoothed over in the next few hours.
I think what we're going to see is we're going to see the Iranian people take back their country. And it's orchestrated well. I don't see us having a massive invasion force like Iraq or Afghanistan. But
as I point out, it's impossible to do that. The ships needed to carry in the tanks and the weapons and the people and the supplies would take a year anyways to build up that kind of force. Just are all sitting in mothballs in Virginia.
I do see us assisting this effort with American air power, intelligence support, anything they need from us, and then ultimately, when they have control of the nation, we'll work together to stabilize Iran, and that part will be actually a very, very pleasing duty. It'll be great to welcome the Persians back into the world community.
Okay, I'm going to push back.
You love to push back, and I know you're going to. I want you to know that I anticipated your pushback, that it would happen within 5 minutes of the podcast starting. So just knowing that I'm prepared for your pushback, go ahead and push back.
You've obviously been trained very well. You're the consummate tactician, General.
In a strategic kind of way.
Yeah, in a strategic kind of way. Okay, so who is the United States of America to say, oh, Iran doesn't get to have a nuclear weapon? United States of America has hold on, there's a lot of pushbacks here, okay? United States of America has lied all my adult life about every single Middle East adventure, WMD, Gaddafi being terrible and all of that, right? And
well,
just
Gaddafi was terrible in his own way. Just because these guys are were stabilizing forces in the region doesn't change the fact that they were very unpleasant dictators.
in order to justify killing people in the Middle East, people in foreign lands, this sounds to me like it's another one of those lies. They're saying, oh, these people have got nuclear weapons. We're going to kill them because we're America and we get to say, right? And then how come Israel? You don't go around, you're not well, Iran's bombing Israel, but you're not bombing Israel. Israel, you're actually giving loads of weaponry and support to Israel, and they've got nuclear weapons. What about them? What about Pakistan? Not that I'm suggesting that you bomb Pakistan, but you've done nothing about them. Or India, they got nuclear weapons. Where do you get to pick and choose who's the enemy going to be, who gets to live or die at the drop of your bombs?
These are very serious questions.
They are actually,
and
I say them flippantly, but people do have those questions and those.
Of course they do. Of course they do. Look, the United States is not, by any stretch of the imagination, some angelic worldly police officer that is the adjudicator of all wrongs and that we haven't committed a few moral wrongs of our own. Let's go back to that wonderful sweetheart that we produced called Victoria Nuland, who orchestrated and helped with the Maidan revolution in Ukraine, and see where that got us. But let's also not forget, let's not forget that after the fall of Rome, and then heading on into the Venetians, and then the little banksters and the financialists from the Venetians perfecting their art move into Holland, and the Dutch East India Company then decides that UK is ripe for the taking. So in 1688, they displace King James, they take over the crown, and the city of London is born. And these represent the 13 darkest, nastiest, most evil people on the planet.
Yeah, I'm curious who the other 12 are. I've heard two names. Well, of course, the Rothschilds are one of the unpleasant groups. There was another one that was with a German name. And then I guess Rockefeller's definitely on the list of these groups. But I'm also interested in the other 10 dark names. But I could always look into it.
And a little country that comes out of nowhere in 1775 because there were upstart colonists who said, you know what, we want a different deal. And we have this thing called the Constitution of the United States of America, which for all its warts and blemishes and attacks still stands today. And so what I would say is, in a dark, nasty sewer of a casino called Planet Earth, you go ahead and tell me the better deal that you're going to get right now today. Go ahead, I'll listen. But I'll argue it to the death unless maybe you have a handle on the four tones and you know what Mao's little red book is about in China, or in maybe that you didn't pay the proper racketeering money in the little suburb outside of Moscow, and now your entire family is dead because you didn't play ball. You know, maybe those are better forms of government that we should start paying attention to. But in a world of very, very complicated realpolitik that goes back for centuries, not that we teach our kids history anymore because their history starts the moment they turn on a smartphone screen. I
had to teach myself a lot of history myself in high school, just reading books, because no one was talking about, I think, important foundational events like, I don't know, World War II or the War of 1812. Those are kind of things that we know. We want to talk about feminism in the 30s and stuff like that. I'm like, guys, like, this is history. So I read The Winds of War and remembered to learn that all I needed to know about the Holocaust, because I didn't want to, and watch Schindler's List. They did take us to see that. But yeah, all the history is out there. You can go find it, but you have to do it yourself. The problem is that once you're getting off your phone, it's not always the thing. Good, solid books.
We have very, very serious consequences and circumstances out of massive sins that the United States is complicit in helping create. If you go back to the Cold War, if you go back to the end of World War II, But behind all of it, Rich, what you're going to find is the true war. And President Trump has taken that war up. Iran, Israel is simply a battlefield on that war. This is a war against the globalists. This is a war against the folks who want complete and utter domination and control of this world, its resources, and everything in it. And if you don't believe me, maybe you haven't read the latest minutes of Larry Fink's wonderful World Economic Forum, where they have decided, hey, we can tokenize everything on this planet and take everything on this planet. And maybe there's too many people on this planet. And once AI, quantum, and robotics get together, we'll really be able to lock things down. If you think that's not a fight worth taking, well, go ahead and throw more rocks at the United States. But I don't think Mark Rutte carrying the European banner into Washington, D.C. tomorrow and calling President Trump daddy is going to work this time.
Yeah, that's why we have to get off this rock and get out there, and yes, out there, as they say on Star Cops, and just do it.
I think that's going to fall apart. In other words, we're at a point of inflection in this globe. We're at a historic moment. We are. And you could hate President Trump and you could hate the United States of America. And that's not going to change whether you have a gallon of gas in your car tomorrow. It's not going to change whether you've got a stick of corn to eat on your plate tonight. So what we have to do is see the world as it is, not as it isn't, or stand up and decry. There's no fairness. They're not bombing Pakistan. They're not bombing Egypt. Where are the bombs for South Africa? And plus, I think we're out of bombs, really. So I think we're going to have to find new ways of doing stuff. Winston Churchill said, well, gentlemen, we're out of money, so now we'll have to think. I would really love a world where we started the think part first.
Yeah, right?
I think that's a really good point. And this is not an invitation for any country to go bombing any other country. In fact, if you're opposed to that, go to notaxforwar.com.
Exactly.
.uk, right, where you can legally withhold your taxes in the UK as a protest against war, plus other things this government are doing. Okay. I've been thinking about this, right? Because I don't want people dying. I know you don't want people dying either, right? You've seen what it's like up front. You've lived it. It's horrible. It's horrible, 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 horrible. And I was thinking about the Soviet occupation of Afghanistan and the Mujahideen's struggle to get rid of this imperial oppressor. And that I suspect many, many people in the West, certainly in the United States and in Europe, which is the West, supported the Mujahideen in their struggle against the Soviet Union. And it was a really, really clear example of a colonizer.
Right.
I think the challenge that we have here is that the entity, the agency that's colonizing the entire globe is in the shadows. But a lot of the conflict is taking form as kinetic, and it's very obvious. And people don't get to see the ghosts or the fleeting shadows that are being attacked. It's a little bit like, I suppose, like Ghostbusters, perhaps. Maybe that's a better analogy. Donald Trump comes in with his plasma blasters or whatever, right? And people can't see.
I think you make such a good point here. You're so correct. But this is one of the strengths of the enemy in this fifth generation warfare environment, is that they operate in nuance. They operate in worlds of plausible deniability with co-opted intelligence agencies, not all of the agency, parts of their agency, and they work together. And they're very determined, and they've been very patient. Psychological operations, information operations, financial operations, framing, extortion, blackmail. These are all the tools. And they also own the media, the mainstream media arms. So how easy is it when you start to see the bombs fly, to create a color revolution someplace, watch a new president come in, and then throw it on him like a bucket of paint and said he did this. This has been what's happening. And so where I'm very gratified, where I think there's great hope for the camouflage to fall off of these of these operations, and to be laid bare by sunlight is is to see the actions that have recently stemmed out of this most recent battlefield, and then look at the absolute contrast when we look at the war in Europe between Russia and Ukraine, well over 2 million dead now. And we look at what's happened in Iran. Well, we're not expending a whole pile of weapons. And before we get all upset about the United States just bringing in the bombers and dropping a lot of bombs, I want you to use your critical thinking skills and think, and I'm not talking just to you, Rich, I'm talking to everybody. What does it look like in a world where President Trump does not bomb Iran and the nuclear facilities in June? What does Israel do in that instance?
Yeah.
In other words, some of these things are about collaring Israeli politics and
yeah, like some of the things with Israel. Do we want an atomic war again? Like, is that something we really want to do? Because that's what a nuclear armed Iran looks like. We don't care about North Korea having nuclear bombs as much because North Korea doesn't want to, doesn't have any designs on any of its neighbors, not even South Korea anymore. It's just like they're two different peoples now.
Israeli designs on what they saw the solution for Iran being, which I can tell you would have been a lot more aggressive than where we find ourselves today. In fact, we see the misalignment in strategies when they go and take out a petrochemical factory, and we're like, "What are you doing?" So where we see the camouflage in Europe fall off with the globalists is you can't use Diego Garcia, you can't use the American bases in Glasgow, Italy, you can't use Sigonella. Spain, no overflights for your tankers here. Not going to use Rota. You're not going to France. Not going to use our airspace. Macron saying we need to rally NATO leaders against the United States. Well, listen here, you little freaks, and you little globalist urchlings that were hatched with silver spoons in your mouths out of the World Economic Forum. Those bases that you're not letting us use. Well, we fought and paid for those bases with American blood when we freed Europe, when we liberated Europe, when we didn't have to, when we sent 19,000 of our own on the beaches of Normandy. And so we can all throw rocks at the U.S. We can all throw rocks at how terrible it is that we're clearing up the straits so that the Europeans can have gas and the fertilizer can make it to Africa so they can grow food to export into European grocery stores. What we would say is just a simple thank you will do. And so what I like is that the veneer is all gone. We see it for what it is.
Yep.
We see it for what it is.
This is what this war has been about, just exposing how useless NATO is and getting prepping the ground for NATO withdrawal for the United States and retrenchment in the Western Hemisphere. That's bringing tens of thousands of troops back home from overseas, closing down all the Middle East bases. A lot of people are complaining, oh, we got all this stuff destroyed. Now, all that stuff that got destroyed, those are things that you don't want to rebuild. It's kind of been a controlled demolition of the American military might in the Middle East so you can go home. That's definitely one of the theories I've been hearing out there.
We see very well-heeled aristocrats that are despondent and desperate that have for too long now been able to control the world's strongest military superpower and the strongest tax base on the planet and wield it in any way that they wanted and then say we're the ones doing it. Well, they have. They've had their agents here. They've had their Victoria Nulands. We're at a point where it's either going to change or at least we'll know who our shadowy overlords are because we'll see them clearly.
I'm listening to you and I'm thinking about it's the empire in the shadows.
Yes.
That's what's been defeated. And then also, Blaine, this may not make sense to you. It may not make sense. And it might make sense to some viewers and some others not, right? I'm actually dealing with a family right now where there's the perpetrator of domestic abuse, very, very smart guy. He's really, really smart. And he's completely convinced this mother's family and friends that he's the goody.
Oh, boy.
Yep.
And
Yes.
I'm going in very, very carefully because I want to protect the mum and the child. But
Hmm.
what the mum is dealing with from her family and friends is, why are you doing this? Because they don't get to see his
Right.
perfidy.
Right.
They don't get to see when he puts his hands around her neck or when he pushes her and she falls down the
Right.
stairs and ends up concussed,
Right.
right?
Right.
But I get to see that, so then I got to go in and disrupt it. So it's a little bit like, I suppose, as a fractal of what's happening here, where we have the
Hmm.
perfidy of the British Empire, of the City of London, and Iran and Israel locked in this conflict that the City of London stokes to profit from, as
Hmm.
really well articulated in Vivify Mariposa's Substack article, who, by the way, did a video with me and is going to be going on Dangerous Intellectuals podcast as a guest very soon. So do watch out
Hmm.
for that. Um, and then, the Europeans, the liberals, are like this, are like the family of the victim. Like, what's going on here? Why are you doing this? Because the oppressor's so nice. Well, they don't see the oppressor in the shadows.
Right.
Right.
And then I
Right.
got to go in and disrupt it. So maybe Trump's a social worker.
That I've seen the president in many different roles. That is not one of them.
Well, he's going in. There's this really abusive setup, and he's going to go in and disrupt it and say, "Look, this cannot continue."
Yeah, that's right. That's
Right?
right. And
And
you
he
may not
used,
like you may not like him, but that's all we got right now.
yeah,
That's what we got.
that is
So
what we
we're
got.
in execution. You don't get to change it once you're in execution. This is now going forward. But I think you said something very interesting. And honestly, I think you are on the cusp of a metaphor. And the metaphor is this stage, and it's a theater. And it's a deadly theater with lots of blood that flows everywhere. So it's a very real theater. And it's these folks who have gussied themselves up in private jets, the richest clothing, the crescendo of schools and degrees and castles and global bodies coming together around foolish things like climate change crap, and convincing everybody of it because of the way they set the stage. The set matters. Having the lights the right way, having the right. We do this in Davos because this is the credibility. This is the smartest people in the world coming around. And honestly, I've been around these people, and when you're around them, you're like, you guys are not that smart.
Yeah, that's been kind of sometimes my experience dealing with a military-industrial complex in the United States. They believe things that you're kind of like, what? That didn't happen that way. Like, Putin did not kill the Polish president and machine gun all the survivors. Like, that was something I heard once at one of these guys' conferences. I'm like, you nuts?
Um, it's a stage that many of the world have bought into and have bought into its legitimacy. But the reason that they did, I believe, over time is that stage, just looking at the World Economic Forum alone, not the Bretton Woods stuff, but going to there, this 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 goes back to 1971. And over time, you institutionalize something simply because it's there again this year. Munich Security Conference, it's there again this year. I guess it's credible. So whatever's said there must be credible. Um, but when you start to tear it all back, then you start to look at the ugliness that's behind the stage, like the color revolutions, the one I was involved in Kyrgyzstan that I didn't know was a color revolution at the time, the Maidan Square thing. And then you start to walk through history and you go, these people have been burning down things since 1,500 years ago. And they're just learning new methods of burning down things.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the reason that people like Vivify write articles like this, and we do these podcasts for folks who can take that walk through history, can see things for what they are, have maybe been experienced on some of their battlefields, understand how important this war is. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you America is going to lead the way and we're the shining city on the hill. I'm going to tell you that, over our 250-year history, we have some very, very dark spots. We've got some very, very bright ones.
Mm.
And if we can alleviate the world of these 13 plus families that have trillions in wealth, endless resources and power, and release their grasp on closing the deal with things like CBDC, social credit scores. You go to prison if you say the wrong thing in a social media post. I know that would never happen. Then America will have done a great service to this world. Then we will have. But Iran, Israel, nothing but a battlefield in a global war, because this is a global war.
Yeah, a global war against the imperialists that have ruled for hundreds of years. Their day is their comeuppance is here, right? Now, the other thing to acknowledge is that Israel is taking a beating from the little that I'm getting from what I consider to be reliable news sources like Joachim Flores's Telegram channel at New Resistance on Telegram, that the Israelis are leaving en masse. It's no longer safe. This festering sore, this military outpost that the British deposited in the Levant to keep people fighting each other.
Yeah,
that's going to go by the by.
It is. I have said this so many times. I have so many friends in Israel, and I can tell you that after this part is over, just like we in the United States have got to go back to the rubble of 9/11, they've got to go back to October 7th, and they've got to go ask the right questions about how that day was even possible.
Yeah.
And then they're going to have to walk through the autopsy of how it was handled, what the actions were, and it's going to be a very difficult thing for them all to face. And face it, they must. And in my nation here, face it, we must. We've got to go back to 9/11, and we're going to have to walk back through that rubble, and we're going to have to conduct a proper autopsy, because covering up and redacting the 9/11 Commission is not called accountability.
No.
But there's enough out there, if you'll do the research, that you can vacate the mainstream narrative, just like the Israelis can vacate the mainstream narratives around October 7th. And I don't begrudge Israel at all. I don't begrudge that state in the least. That was a horrific day. I understand it.
Yep. It definitely has to be explored, and we certainly saw some of it in the BB files. And I do think whoever released the BB files, they're going to release more stuff about what happened there in the times to come, because that's very interesting that we've seen all that stuff. So we're definitely going to have to. Israel's definitely going to have to go back and look at it, just like the United States needs to go back and look at 9/11, because someone conned you guys into doing. People did things to drive you berserk, and now some of them are still alive and can be held accountable.
But they've got to ask some internal questions about this.
Yeah, they were victimized by their own government, I believe. They set it up. Okay, how do you think this is going to play out? If you can let us know briefly.
Well, if all goes well, and I think it will, but it could be rough. We may see some terror cells in Europe and the United States pop off, because let's remember, the IRGC, they're true believers. If they view that it's over for them, then what's to stop them from martyring themselves in a most glorious way through some terror event or whatever? So don't think that just because you're cutting the head off the snake doesn't mean that the snake doesn't still have bite in it. It does. And so we could see the next few days, the next week, 2 weeks be rough. But then once that gets done, then I think we're going to see something really wonderful emerge. We can see an Iranian people that are greatly relieved, will welcome, I think, our country in as liberators to help them stabilize, to help walk them into the world community. I think there'll be a lot of opportunity. I think you're going to see China and Russia, very pleased that stabilization is happening in the Straits. I think we're going to have to make a concerted effort because we're losing the growing season or the planting season now in Africa. We're going to have to really come together as a world community and start addressing the precursors to famine that I see globally right now. I see it in my country. I see it all over, and the Straits doesn't make it easier. I think we're also going to see problems with the supply chains on electronics. We need those electronics. It's not just about a smartphone in your hand. It's about a medical device that could save somebody's life. And so we've got to restore things. And then I'll tell you what's not going to go away is our focus on getting the Ukraine-Russia conflict behind us. But maybe the absolute thrashing that the European leaders are about to take from President Trump, maybe that's the key to ending that war, because right now, President Trump does have the legal authority to pull us out of NATO. And I think he is going to put those knives right in front of Mark Rutte tomorrow when those two gentlemen meet. And one of those knives is going to be, the war is over. And so you're now going to follow my leadership in that war being over. And if they don't want to, well, then we really won't be a part of NATO, and then you get what you get.
Yep.
There is so much that is happening as a outcome or a side effect of this conflict that you and I would both are both very happy about. The destruction of the US bases in the Middle East, so they won't be there anymore. They're not viable.
Mm-hmm.
And also the
well, not destruction. We'll just leave them. I mean, we won't have a need to be there.
But the US won't come back. And then also Israel being put down a peg or two, and NATO, the US out of NATO being completely diminished. Yes, dear God. Okay.
Yep.
Blaine, thank you.
Yep. So there you have it. That was kind of what I've been seeing out there. Oh yeah, I definitely want to do that video there eventually. But while I close this one. Oh. I apparently had a multi-screen option that I was not where I had, and saying warning you not to do it, but I meant to stop sharing. Okay, well, why don't I do it this way? Yeah, I can just go to his channel later. And now we'll share one last short video. But I wanted to cover yesterday. I wanted to cover more of the space race, and yeah, literally the space race. So here we go. I was watching this video and wanted NASA's plan.
In March 2026, NASA revealed an ambitious new plan for the future of American space exploration. On the surface, this is a blueprint for colonizing the moon, which is incredible. But the even more important revelation is that NASA itself has fundamentally changed into something that the world has not seen in decades. And the reason for this change goes deeper than just new leadership. There is a great power competition that will play out on the moon in the decade to come. The old NASA was set to lose that contest, but the new NASA is playing to win. And this is how they're going to do it.
And this is what they've been trying to stop for decades. Are all those people that Blaine and Rich were just talking about? This is what they've been trying to prevent us from going. They killed it off in the 70s, and then in the 80s started the systematic destruction of the Western industrial power, because they didn't want us to be able to do this, what we're watching right now.
When Administrator Jared Isaacman took the stage at NASA headquarters in Washington, D.C., there was one simple word projected on the screen behind him: ignition. That word announces the beginning of a transformative journey for the American space program. The status quo has been rejected and replaced with a new direction to set high expectations and then meet them. Isaacman acknowledges that for decades, NASA has been spread too thin. They've tried to make everyone happy and in the process have accomplished very little. The result has been billions of taxpayer dollars wasted and years of progress lost. He also made it clear why that change must begin right now. because there is more to lose than just time and money. There is a great power competition with the Chinese to stake the first permanent claim on the moon. And this is nothing like the space race the world saw before in the 1960s.
But this time, the goal is not flags and footprints. This time, the goal is to stay. America will never again give up the moon.
Now, we have heard these words before from NASA administrators and politicians over the past decades, but words are hollow without actions, and historic actions require intelligent plans, which is the one thing that NASA has lacked since the very beginning of the Artemis moon program. Better late than never. A detailed, achievable, step-by-step blueprint for the Artemis moon base has finally arrived. And it all begins with a complete overhaul of the moon landing schedule as we have come to know it. For the first big change, there will be no boots on the moon for Artemis 3. This has been reformatted into a dress rehearsal mission that will play out in low Earth orbit. Now, this probably sounds counterintuitive to everything we just said, but it's not. Because the old plan had a jump from Artemis 2, which is a crewed test flight of the Orion spacecraft, to landing on the moon using an entirely separate and unproven HLS vehicle. This was an unachievable goal, and the risk factor was so high that it never would have gotten off the ground. So the launch date became a can that was kicked further and further down the road with every year that passed. Under the new direction, Artemis 3 will instead feature the crewed Orion spacecraft and the lander vehicle meeting up in low Earth orbit for a rendezvous and docking procedure. The crew will then transfer into the lander for a test of the life support, communications, and propulsion systems. If possible, they'll also test the new lunar EVA spacesuits inside the lander airlock for the first time. Doing this in low Earth orbit means that problems can be solved and lives can be saved if anything doesn't work as expected. We already know about the Orion spacecraft, but this new moon lander is still a bit of a question mark. For many years now, this was assumed to be a lunar variant of the SpaceX Starship, but now, that is not so certain. Isaacman has confirmed that Blue Origin is back in the race alongside SpaceX with their Blue Moon lander, and one or both of these vehicles will be tested on Artemis 3. It all depends on who can get the job done in time for launch.
And that's great. We need competition again. All this going to one giant conglomerate of 5 things. We need true competition if we're going to get back to space in a big way. And this is what we need. 2 different landing vehicles? Great.
This is a big aspect to the new direction at NASA. Even SpaceX can be put on notice. Just because you won a contract in 2022 does not mean you are guaranteed a moon landing. The only thing that matters now is execution, and the first company to achieve their goal will be the one who sends American astronauts back to the moon. The deadline for Artemis 3 has been moved up to next year, 2027, and then once the new lunar lander is confirmed, the winner will be expected to keep moving at incredible speed. They now have only a few months to test their vehicle in an uncrewed moon landing and then turn around a completed design for Artemis 4. This mission is now scheduled for early 2028, and this is when America returns to the moon with a landing in the South Pole region. But like Isaacman said, this is not about flags and footprints, so to make their point clear to the world, NASA will land people on the moon again in 2028 with Artemis 5 scheduled before the end of that year. Now, that sounds overly ambitious, but this is how NASA used to operate in their golden...
Yeah, this is a good breakdown on how NASA used to do it. And we're going to see as they get better at it, operation tempo will increase. That's something we need to understand. As they get better and used to doing this again, we will get it going.
Era. The turnaround time between the first moon landing on Apollo 11 and the next landing on Apollo 12 was just 120 days. And this is more than just a flex. This will set the new tempo for American moon landings, with a crew arriving on the surface once every 6 months from here on out. This is also where NASA's commitment shifts to establishing their permanent outpost on the moon. And that begins with prioritizing surface operation over everything else. So the Lunar Gateway space station that was originally planned to orbit the moon, That's no longer on the table. But it doesn't mean that time and resources spent building the gateway have been wasted either. All of the hardware that has already been developed for the station is being repurposed into the design of the first moon base. The construction of that base will happen over 7 years, and NASA has set themselves a budget of $20 billion to get this done. It all plays out in 3 phases, and this starts right now. Phase 1 covers 2026 to 2028, and the primary goal over this time is to secure reliable access to the surface of the moon with a high launch cadence. That means sending 25 missions in the first 3 years, with 21 of those being lunar landings. 2 of those will be crewed missions, but the majority of this phase is about experimenting with new technologies for the future moon base operations. This includes sending nuclear power to the moon. There is a sunlight problem up there that needs to be solved, and nuclear energy is the only way to do it. The day and night cycle of the moon is a lot longer than what we know on Earth, so the Artemis base will experience 2 weeks of continuous sunlight, but then it will be plunged into another 2 weeks of darkness. During that time, the temperature will drop below negative 200 degrees Celsius, and without a source of heat, all of the hardware will freeze solid. That tends to be really bad for electronics, and they typically don't come back to life when the sun rises again. So NASA is going to experiment with radioisotope thermal generators. Basically, you have a radioactive element like plutonium that is actively decaying. That process naturally releases heat, and this heat can be captured to prevent assets on the moon from freezing solid. What kind of assets are we talking about here? Well, NASA has a radical...
I was talking to my step-brother and step-nephew about this on Easter Sunday, about how we can use the same type of technology up in the Canadian North to keep people up there well supplied instead of just bringing in huge amounts of oil all the time. And this will also have the difference on the South Pole as well.
Radical new idea for exploring the moon: rocket drones. They call this new vehicle Moonfall. It's based on the Ingenuity Mars helicopter platform, but instead of propellers, it uses small rocket thrusters to move around. Each drone can fly for 150 seconds in one hop and cover up to 50 kilometers distance. They are going to use these to explore dangerous and hard-to-reach locations like tops of mountains and edges of deep craters. During Phase 1, NASA will also deploy their Viper rover. This is a golf cart-sized vehicle that is already built, tested, and has been waiting for a ride to the moon for years. 2027 will finally be that year. Viper will arrive at the moon on a Blue Origin lander. Once there, it's going to begin mapping the South Pole region for confirmed signs of water ice and other volatile materials like hydrogen, oxygen, and rare earth metals. NASA considers this to be lunar prospecting. Establishing the locations of these resources will be critical when Phase 3 comes around. Viper will be joined on the ground by 2 lunar terrain vehicles, one to be driven by the crew members and one that drives autonomously. Each rover will be able to cover up to 900 kilometers of the lunar surface, and beyond just exploration, they'll be used for work purposes like moving equipment and leveling ground for new construction. Overhead will be a new group of lunar communications and observation satellites. These will allow continuous data streaming from any location on the moon to the surface of the Earth with a 500 megabyte per second throughput. They'll also provide a continuous view of the entire lunar surface from space. Now, this is very important to us, as in you and me, because NASA has mandated that all of these vehicles we just mentioned, the drones, the rovers, the electric cars, they are all going to be equipped with high-quality cameras that will live stream their entire mission back to Earth for everyone in the world to see.
Oh, that's going to be so good. Like, people are going to be going to sleep listening to astronauts talking on the moon again. It'll be great.
That sets us up for Phase 2, the transition into building a moon base. This plays out from 2029 to 2032. It involves 27 launches and 24 landings, and includes the first infrastructure for permanent habitation modules. Over this time, NASA will deliver 6 new rovers, and these go beyond just exploration. NASA is talking about excavation in this phase, machines that can move rock, level ground, dig trenches for power cables and pipelines. We are building the foundation for things to come. One of these new rovers will also be the first pressurized mobile habitat. It's a vehicle being developed by the Japanese Space Agency in partnership with Toyota. The 15,000 kilogram vehicle will essentially become an apartment on wheels. Astronauts inside will be comfortable enough to hang out in short-sleeved t-shirts and will travel at a speed of 3.5 kilometers per hour for days on end. The rover is expected to have a 10-year lifespan and will operate for up to 150 hours in total darkness. Phase 2 will also demand more power than ever before, and that comes in two flavors. The first will be solar energy. Solar panels will be mounted on top of long poles to capture as much sunlight as possible, and they'll be connected into large battery systems for long-term energy storage. That is going to be supplemented with nuclear power, and this goes beyond just keeping things warm. NASA will deploy nuclear fission reactors to the moon that generate hundreds of watts of electricity and supply multiple assets simultaneously. By the end of Phase 2, everything will be in place to support people living on the moon for extended durations. Now, Phase 3 is where we actually move in. This covers everything from 2033 onward, and the highlight of Phase 3 will be permanent habitation of the Artemis moon base. NASA projects that they can have a rotating crew of 4 people staying on the moon for 28 days on a single mission. People will be living in multiple connected modules, basically a space station like the ISS or what Gateway was imagined to be, except built on solid ground. The habitat modules will be powered directly by their own nuclear fission generator and will be supplied with around 8,000 kilograms of food, water, and air every month. Outside of the base, NASA will begin their first in-situ resource utilization. That means harvesting rock and soil from the environment and using it to their advantage. Water can be extracted from ice reserves in the bottom of shadowed craters. The water can be split into oxygen to breathe and hydrogen to use as fuel. NASA is also going to start experimenting with 3D printing, taking dust from the surface and melting it down into a pourable cement that will eventually build the first genuinely permanent structures on the moon. Now, if you're thinking that this sounds like doing the impossible, then you are not crazy.
Yeah.
NASA has admitted that what they are trying to achieve is very nearly impossible. But that's kind of the point. We're not doing this because it is easy, but because it's hard.
Right.
The Chinese are also fully prepared to do hard, nearly impossible things. These are the stakes of the new space race. Good enough is no longer good enough. And NASA knows something now that they've been missing for a long time. Because the real key objective of this whole Artemis plan isn't actually to build a moon base. The real imperative is to inspire the next generation of scientists and engineers, the young people who will accomplish things in their lives that we would genuinely believe to be impossible today. But those kids will never
get in our flying cars, kids. We're going to get our flying cars.
do that if they don't have the motivation to go out and make it happen. It's NASA's job to lead by example, and they haven't been doing that for a very long time. But the future is finally back on track today. If you want to see a vision of what NASA's city on the moon will look like beyond Phase 3 of the Artemis,
and we'll probably cover that in a future episode. I just wanted to... Oh, yeah, definitely. Yes, I did mention that, JP. I did talk a bit about, the Iranian. It's about how basically Iran took exception to Israel continuing to bomb Hezbollah in Lebanon, and then said, "Oh, this is a Straits issue," and America's like, "No, it's not. Come on, guys." So I expect that to be all resolved probably sometime tomorrow, but just a matter of time. So that's kind of my viewpoint on that one. So, anyways, yeah, I'm going to try and start including more of that space race type content in the show, just because I think it's cool and I think that's the direction of travel. I definitely included it in the Grok summary, and I've concluded it here at the end. So I think I'll be doing like a little science video kind of thing every time. Anyways, I got to get going. It's getting to be 4:20. My two-way thing went on until like 3 o'clock today because everyone wanted to talk to the ceasefire deal. 1 point. I haven't really looked into the whole 10-point plan thing because I think it's a maximalist plan, and it will get more into. It'll end up being a lot more condensed when the final deal is struck. I could look into the 10-point plan tomorrow. I guess I'll make that a priority. I've just been inundated with all this other stuff that's been going on, so I've been really looking into that particular thing. I was mentioned I'm going to be bringing on a guy I know named Josh Johnson, who's an ex-Marine and currently a lawyer, and I'm going to be interviewing him in much the way I interviewed my friend Richard Swank. So that's up in the air. Owen wants to do something this week too, maybe about the Middle East, and I will see if Boarhound wants to do something Friday. So I gotta get some food in me. My stomach's been like punching me in the growling the entire podcast, so I have to get going. Good to see you here, JP. I also had another person from India say good night. I see one reporting Iran allies. One says Lebanon. I've not seen an official one. Yeah, I think that one's still to be worked out. So, but like I said, I need to get some food in me because I'm in a bit of my stomach's in a bit of a revolt right now. But you can always rewind and see what I commented on earlier. Anyways, this is the Spy Guy. If you like this, like, share, subscribe. And also, if you like what you see here, I still have my locals page as well. That's spyguy@locals.com, which I really need to get updated yet again. But, it's been a crazy week with the war and all. So I'll see you guys tomorrow. I need to stop hanging out so much with my two-way community and start doing shows earlier, I think. Okay, thank you. I'm getting more of my research done than just listening to them talk. Okay, bye-bye.